Good evening, everyone. It's wonderful to see you all here this evening, and I would just like to point out that I think I can say safely that by the time we get out of here, it will still be light outside. So it's wonderful to see you all here tonight and to learn more about our latest community survey results with our friends at Network Impact. If we've not yet met, my name is Christopher Gash, and I am the chair of Incourage's board of directors. So when you came in this evening, you should have received a couple of pieces. The first is a reflection sheet, and the second is a printout of a few key slides from the presentation tonight. We'll talk a little bit about those. But you may have also, I understand, may have received a handout that was prepared by someone other than Incourage and would have come from someone other than an Incourage staff or board member. While we understand that there are certainly a few in this community who may not support or understand the Tribune Building project as a whole or Incourage's mission as a whole, from what we can tell, the information on this handout, which we just received this evening as well, does draw some incomplete conclusions with numbers that are pulled out of context. We do believe that transparency is key to a shared understanding and collective ownership of this place that we all call home. And we want you to know that from inception, Incourage's strategy has been guided by resident input and has always been to meet the changing needs of this community. So because we've nothing to hide, we invite each and every one of you to stop by to have a conversation, to call, to email, stop in with the office. Anyone on the board or staff will be happy to talk with you. We are here for you, and we're here for good. So with that, I know we're all here to talk tonight about the community survey results. In 2012, Incourage led the first ever community survey, and 5 years later now we are working together with nationally recognized research partners to conduct another community survey to understand residents' current hopes, concerns, and priorities for the future of our community. Your responses to this survey will help inform and influence Incourage's strategy and investment of resources into our community going forward. Just out of curiosity, can I see a show of hands for anyone who participated in the first community survey in 2012? Excellent. Thank you. Tonight we're going to hear about what has changed in the 5 years since that first survey, or in some cases, hasn't changed. 2017 community survey results show that residents have strong opinions about our community's future. Nearly 4,000 residents of all ages throughout Southwood County area have shared their thoughts and opinions, and soon we'll hear the results and share some of our reactions and questions. So this evening we're going to hear from Heather McKellips, who led the community survey local effort on behalf of Incourage, and we're also going to hear from Madeleine Taylor of Network Impact, who conducted this survey. Before I fully introduce Madeleine, I do have a couple of quick housekeeping items. First, those two pieces that you received from Incourage on the way in. The first is a reflection sheet to capture some of your thoughts during and after the presentation to help us better understand your reactions to this data. And two, the printouts of a few key slides to follow along. Now, the full presentation will be available on our website following tonight's event, or if you'd like, you can certainly stop by the office, give us a call if you'd like a paper copy of it as well. So with that, I'm pleased to introduce our speaker this evening, Madeleine Taylor. Madeleine is a cultural anthropologist and founder and CEO of Network Impact, an organization that provides strategy, tools, research, and consulting expertise to accelerate and spread the development and use of networks to support positive social change. For more than 20 years, Madeleine has worked with public and nonprofit organizations and national foundations on strategy, program development, and assessment. She taught research methods at Harvard University for many years and earned Harvard's Award for Distinction in Teaching. Please join me in welcoming Madeleine.
Thank you, Christopher. Thank you. Good evening. It is my great pleasure and privilege to be with you tonight to share highlights from the results of the community survey that Incourage initiated late last year. It's a privilege, and I just want to say that I might have to drink a few sips of water from time to time because I've got a terrible chest cold. But it's a pleasure and a privilege, and I just want to add a couple of words to what Christopher said about Network Impact that may help you understand a little bit better the work we did on this particular survey. I hope I'm operating this right. Here we go. At Network Impact, we work with individuals and institutions and communities that are building connections and collaborations to meet their shared goals. And a great part of our work is survey research or evaluation research more broadly. It's an integral component to the work that we do. But we are not experts in fielding large-scale community surveys, like the community survey from last year. And so in this instance, we co-developed the survey with Incourage. So the survey questions we co-developed with Incourage, but we partnered with the Center for Survey Research at the University of Massachusetts to field the survey or to administer the survey more broadly. And the CSR is one of the nation's premier research centers. They do work all over the country, and they have a special expertise in sampling approaches, particularly random sampling approaches, which are important to ensure that the results of the survey not only reflect the perspectives of the individuals who responded directly to the survey, but also reflect the perspectives of the community more broadly. My presentation this evening is going to be very straightforward and simple. I'm going to spend just a few minutes describing the goal of the survey and how it was conducted. And then I'm going to share some of the highlights with you. And I do say highlights because we're hitting the sort of the above the fold top line here. There are more results and details that you can dive into deeper. They'll be available on the Incourage website within a week or two. We've also built in a couple of opportunities for you all to ask questions and share your reflections. So Christopher asked the same question, and I'd love to see that show of hands again, the people who responded or remember the 2012 survey. Yeah, so it looks like it's most of you in the room. The goal of that survey, as Christopher said, was to gather information from community members about their hopes and their concerns and priorities for the future. And the goal of the 2017 survey was precisely the same, with the advantage that in fact, many of the questions on the 2017 survey are the same or similar to questions on the 2012 survey, which gives us an opportunity to compare the responses in those 2 years and get a feeling for how residents' perspectives may have changed in the interim. The questions on the surveys explore, and I'm just going to read them out now for us. These are the topics that were covered in the survey. Residents' overall satisfaction with the Southwood County area, the strengths of the community as well as the most important problems facing the community, key words or phrases that residents use to describe their community, how well different organizations are doing in addressing community challenges, residents' priorities for the future, residents' participation in civic activities, and then information about respondent demographic characteristics like age, education, zip code, time living in area, and income. I thought I would bring this up. This is saying the same thing I already said, which is that the 2017 survey and the 2012 survey have many questions in common, but it's also to give you start you with this visual cue. Throughout the presentation, all the results from 2017 are in purple, and the results from 2012 are in orange. And that's going to be on the slides as well, but just to give you a little heads up there. This slide describes the survey process. I talked a little bit about the fact that we co-developed the survey with Incourage and then worked with the CSR to administer it. The CSR mailed, in November and December last year, mailed out a 4-page survey to a random sample of 2,500 households, requesting that the youngest adult in the household respond. And that's because survey research nationally shows that the respondents to surveys, telephone surveys and mailed surveys, tend to skew older. Older people are more likely to respond than younger people. So we asked the youngest person in the household to respond. 491 eligible responses were received. Eligible meaning the respondent was an adult, 18 years and older, and lived in the target area, which I'm going to describe in a moment. 491 exceeded the 300 minimum we needed for a sample that was could be analyzed in the ways that we hoped we could, with a response rate of just over 20%, which is also higher than we anticipated. So that's all good news. Incourage also conducted research using precisely the same survey questions to gather additional responses to the community survey. That survey was available in English as well as Spanish and Hmong. And Incourage also led community conversations with residents at the same time. These are the target zip codes for the community survey in both 2012 and 2017. They include Nakusa, Pittsville, Port Edwards, Rudolph, Vesper, and 2 zip codes in Wisconsin Rapids. This slide describes the demographic, the characteristics of the sample. And the takeaway here, most important takeaway here, is that the survey sample closely matches the population statistics for the area based on the 2010 census. So what that's telling us is that the sample looks like the community more broadly. And now I'm going to go on to share some of the highlights. And the way we've organized this is we have a title slide for a set of questions. And on the title slide is the question as it appeared on the survey. And in each case, I'm going to read out the question so we have it in mind when we're looking at the results. So this question asked, or said, here is a list of words and phrases that could describe the Southwood County area. How well do you think each word or phrase describes our community? And then there were a list of phrases and words. The headline here is that in 2017, as in 2012, large shares of residents described their community as hardworking and caring. In addition, large shares of residents in both 2012 and 2017 said that while they're uncertain of the future, they're ready for change. And you'll see in the next slide what's a little interesting about the 2017 results is that the larger shares of people in 2017 said that ready for change described their community perfectly. Smaller shares of residents in both 2012 and 2017 described their community as innovative. However, among those who'd said that the word innovative describes this community perfectly, large shares of those respondents were young people between the ages of 18 and 29, as well as people over 65. So there's a constituency in this community who think that innovative describes this community perfectly, that includes younger people and people over 65. This slide describes, at the bottom of the slide, you'll see all of the words and phrases that were included in the question. People were asked to say to what degree that word described their community, described it perfectly, described it somewhat, or didn't describe it very well at all. And what I'd like, I mean, you're welcome, I think this is in your packet, so if you can take a look at it more closely if you'd like. What I'd like to point out here is the observation I made a moment ago, which is that definitely there are larger shares of people who are unsure of the future, who just say that describes their community perfectly, but also larger shares of people who say that they're ready for change and that describes the community perfectly. You know, readiness for change is an essential condition for resident-led action on community priorities, and we know that, broadly speaking, in communities across the country. And this is a slide that describes your responses, residents' responses to this question of whether ready for change describes your community. And what strikes me about this is that, you know, on average, 3 out of 4 residents are saying they're ready for change that describes the community perfectly or somewhat. So I think that's, to me, a striking finding. This next section describes community challenges. The question on the survey was, overall, what do you see as the most important problem facing the Southwood County area? And note that this is a question that's asking for an open-ended response. In other words, people wrote in the responses here. And we took the written-in responses and we identified themes in those responses, and then we coded them or counted them based on the themes. And these are the results. I believe you have this in your packet as well. What's interesting to me, and of course, I didn't say this at the outset, but it's a very important thing to remember. These are numbers. You have the context, you have the experience. You all have in your heads a way to interpret these results that I simply don't. So I'm going to tell you what I think is striking about the results, but it's from the point of view of the research. I'm sure you will have all sorts of other ideas and insights. So what strikes me about these results is that while in 2012, lots of people said one of the problems or challenges facing the community had to do with economic factors, but named a variety of economic factors, including unemployment. In 2017, really very clearly, people are pointing to a lack of good jobs. When they're talking about the economy, that really rises to the top. And then you can see drug use and limited local amenities follow in terms of shares of people identifying these as challenges. Again, we're going to have an opportunity for an open Q&A, and I'd be delighted to hear your reflections. We're going to try to get through a little bit of the results first. Here are some quotes from the write-in responses in the survey that I'd just like to share with you. There were many of them. We never used to have to lock our doors, but we do now. City Council people need to stop turning away businesses because we can't just rely on being a mill town. I can't afford a YMCA membership, so the new Y won't work for me. Needs to be options we can all afford. This next section reports on residents' responses to a question about who's meeting the challenges and to what degree. The question on the survey was, how well are each of the following people or organizations doing in addressing challenges that the Southwood County area faces? And there were a list of kinds of organizations or entities. This is a busy slide. I want to remind you that the purple represents 2017, the orange represents 2012. There's a scale at the top which helps you understand that the bolder the color means excellent or good, in the positive range. The top takeaways for me here, based on the data, are in 2017, survey respondents gave charitable and nonprofit organizations, as well as public schools, their highest rating. And in 2012 and 2017, elected officials are among the lowest performing, and that's consistent in 2012 and 2017. The next question asked about community assets. What are the assets of this community? Again, this was an open-ended question where people wrote in a response. We grouped the responses thematically and then coded or counted them. This graphic presents the results a little differently. In this case, if you just want to focus on the purple for a minute, this will be the 2017 results, the size of the bubble describes the share of respondents who describe this as a community asset. And what's striking to me is that right at the top of the list, natural environment recreation, right? Large shares, small town feel, good school system. These numbers are diminishing. Good people, honest and safe. And then a couple of other sense of community and sporting events. I don't know precisely what to make of this, but large shares of folks in 2017 reported that sense of community was an important community asset, and it's kind of switched so that natural environment recreation are on the top of mind for people in 2017. Here's some quotes. Again, there were many, and we pulled a few that reflect on community assets. This is a friendly place. It's a safe community with lots of good people. There are efforts happening to develop it for young families. The splash pad on the west side was a fantastic addition, and the addition of small businesses adds something to do. Wine and beer shop, clothing shops, home decor shops. I'm excited about the YMCA Boys and Girls Club. It's easier to get involved in this community than in the big cities. The area offers many themed events celebrating our natural resources, the Cranberry Fest, the Sandhill Cranes, and monarch butterflies. So we're going to pause there for a minute. I've shared quite a lot. You have some of the data in your hands. Any immediate questions, any reflections, things that you saw or heard that you thought were surprising, what you didn't anticipate, things that make perfect sense to you based on what you know?
I think the first thing that stood out to me was on, I don't know, the second or third page, with a pie chart showing that in 2012, drugs wasn't even an issue, or at least a big issue. And then 2017, it's 33% of the people mentioning it.
Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes people, when they're responding to a survey, when people are writing in a response, it's what's top of mind for them. So, you know, if you ask them once a month or over the course of a year, different things might occur to them at different times. So this is what, you know, this is what's top of mind for people in November or December of last year. Any other? Yes.
It seems as though it might mirror the national issues, lack of good jobs, drug problems. From your experience, is that?
I'm sorry, the first part was these are national issues?
Well, it looks like our data might reflect the national issues.
Yes, yes.
I don't know if the percentages are the same, but.
Yeah, and I don't have at my fingertips right now where people place lack of good jobs in relationship to lack of local amenities or drug use, but these are certainly themes that exist in many other communities. Ian?
Thank you. Thanks. The majority of respondents mentioned that they wanted change, they were ready for change. That seemed like a real majority. Change to different people means different things. And I'm wondering if there's any way for you to categorize what kind of change everybody wants.
So I really appreciate that comment because, of course, it's perfectly true. I believe that there are and will be ongoing conversations facilitated by Incourage to precisely delve into that kind of question. So everybody wants change, but what kind of change do we need and what kind of change do we want? And you're right, people may have different perspectives on that. But I think, speaking as an anthropologist, a social anthropologist, readiness for change is kind of a sort of a baseline starting point for change, because if people aren't ready for change or they're resistant to change or they're afraid of change, then it's hard to have the conversation. So it's a very good starting point.
Can you clarify the communities that were involved in the survey? Because it seemed like when you mentioned them that there were a number of smaller kind of communities that were not surveyed. Like I didn't see Barron, I didn't see Grand Rapids, perhaps Saratoga. As a business owner and a community member, I consider those kind of part of our Southwood County area and that they're an integral part of our community. So.
I think I'm going to ask Heather to take that question.
That's a great question. I was the project manager for this, and when we talk about communities, we looked at by zip code. So if you look at Barron or Grand Rapids, that's a 54494 or 5495, to make sure that we get the widest region for our area. That's a good question. Thank you.
I can't see because of the lights, but are there any other folks with their hands up right now? Looks like we're good for right now. There'll be another opportunity. Okay, so let's move on. So looking to the future, right? The question on the survey read, next is a series of statements that could describe the Southwood County area in the future. For each statement, indicate how important to you or how important you think it is to achieve this. And the options were not at all important, somewhat important, and very important. Again, we're using the bubbles here. What's striking is that large shares of respondents think that lots of things are important, right? So if you just look at the top line, 89% saying that good quality jobs are accessible to all is very important for Southwood County to achieve in the future. That's a large share of respondents. 82% saying quality education, 78% saying attracting and retaining young adults and families, support for local entrepreneurs and businesses at 78%, and a highly trained and competitive workforce also at 78%. And you'll notice that 3 out of those 5 are relate to economic factors. 73% here, nearly 3 in 4, saying that local organizations and public and nonprofit sectors should be working together to address community priorities and concerns. 73% as well, transparency and trust in public decision-making. That's important for the future, very important for the future. 71% say a welcoming community is very important for your future together. 65% say more leaders with a bold vision for our community's future. And 64% say residents are open to new ideas and change. And those are your top 10. We've gone ahead and grouped some of these answers. They're the same responses to the same question, but we've grouped them there's thematically. So there's some responses that have to do with being a connected community, or people connecting with one another. 73% saying local organizations in all sectors work together to address community priorities and concerns. So that's about local organizations collaborating. More than half saying strong cooperation across local municipalities is very important. A whopping 85% saying many residents active in civic life. There's also another cluster of responses that have to do with a community for the future. 64% of residents, 64% of respondents said that residents are open to new ideas and change is very important for Southwood County to achieve in the future. 65% said more leaders with a bold vision for your community's future, and 59% support for innovation and creativity. And the 2012 results were comparable, very close. So that's a consistent message coming from residents on these questions over a period of 5 years. One of the things we asked was how different demographic groups responded to these questions. And what we're going to share with you here is some differences based on age. What struck me is that there were no differences in people's responses based on age across a variety of statements, and these are they. So these are where over 50% of respondents said that these are important to achieve, with no statistical difference between younger people and older people. It includes economic priorities and housing priorities. So it's saying that independent of their age and stage in the life cycle, these are important to achieve. This slide describes something a little different. It describes differences between people of different ages and the ways that they responded. Large shares of residents said that having good quality jobs that are accessible to all is very important, but residents ages 30 to 44 led the way, so a larger share of residents in that age category said that. Over half of young people 18 to 29 say having many residents who are active in civic life is a priority for them. More than half, it's a large share of young people who are calling out the importance of being active in civic life. Residents 45 to 64 express more concern about transparency and trust in public decision-making than other age groups. And older residents are also more likely to say that a community that supports innovation and creativity is very important, and that high-quality, comprehensive local news coverage is a priority. So again, the numbers shake out in this way, and you have more context than I do to understand what this might mean in terms of who in your community is thinking what is important, and how that might differ from other age groups. This is something we discovered through some of our analysis. Again, what it means for the community and what that cues up for you in terms of your thinking about the future is something really that I would love to hear from you about. It's just a finding. Compared to people who have lived in Southwood County for 10 years or less, people who have lived in the area for 11 years or more are more likely to be employed full-time, to earn more income, and have higher levels of educational attainment. The reverse is also true. Compared to people who have lived in Southwood County for 11 plus years, people who have lived in the area for 10 years or less are more likely to be employed part-time or looking for work, earn less income, and have lower levels of educational attainment. This next slide describes, once again, we've taken responses from different questions and grouped them thematically. The theme in this reporting of results is information and civic engagement. The three questions that we drew the responses from read as follows. How informed do you feel about these things in your community? And there were a list of things. Many obstacles keep people from becoming as engaged in their community as they would like. How much of an obstacle is each of the following for you? And next is a series of statements that could describe the Southwood County area in the future. For each statement, indicate how important you think it is to achieve this. And we just looked at those results. So if you look at the column on the left with responses to how informed, the dark purple describes the percentage saying not very informed or somewhat informed. Dark purple is not very, and the light purple is somewhat. So it's really saying relatively small shares of residents, 15%, are saying that they're not very informed about issues that affect their community. And that's not a surprising result. It means that all of you have an idea of, feel fairly well informed about issues that affect your community. You might be informed about different issues because you care about different issues, but you feel that you're informed about the issues that you care about. But at the same time, 34%, which is more than 1 in 3, say they're not very informed about their neighbors' perspectives on local issues. And nearly 1 in 3 say they're not very informed about how decisions are made that affect their community. The second column describes obstacles. The first donut says that more than 1 in 3 respondents said that lack of information or not knowing how to begin in becoming engaged civically was a big obstacle. And then 48%, nearly 50% said that lack of trust and transparency in public decision-making was a big obstacle to civic engagement. And the final column describes opportunities for change. 73% of respondents said that transparency and trust in public decision-making is very important to achieve in the future, and that high-quality comprehensive local news coverage weighing in at 41%. So what this says is there are some gaps in how well people are informed about different issues or questions in their community. There's some obstacles to being informed and engaged, and there's some potential priorities lined up in the results of the survey that might lead you to think about ways to address those obstacles. The next set of responses or results describe residents' responses to a question about Incourage's role. The question and activities and investments, the question on the survey was, Incourage focuses on long-term community development. In your opinion, how important are the following Incourage priorities and programs to the future of our community? And I'm going to invite Heather to come up to describe the results of this.
Great, thanks, Madeleine. So this really speaks to what Christopher said in the opening as far as resident input driving our strategy and informing our strategy. And we were thrilled to see these results and that strong percentage around growing good jobs. And I just wanted to take a moment to share that over the last decade, Incourage has worked hard to change our community's approach to workforce development with support from leaders in manufacturing and businesses. Some of you are in the room tonight. We planned and facilitated an innovative program called Workforce Central. And in fact, last fall, Incourage piloted a job quality business assessment with Mariani Packing Company, and our former colleague who led that effort is in the room tonight. So Jenny, thank you for your work. This assessment was funded through a grant by the National Fund for Workforce Solutions because of the work that we did with Workforce Central. And this work was just starting to peel back what does good quality job mean, because we all probably have a different perception of what that means, both from the employer stand and employee. So this was an opportunity to start figuring out what that meant, because we know businesses require trained workers, and workers today really want employers who are committed to their community and are committed to providing a good place to work. But in order to fulfill our core mission of meeting the changing needs in the community, we have adapted our role to this program over time. And most recently, when Midstate invested in a whole workforce training program, that allowed us to transition from a primary leadership role to a supporting role. So we were really thrilled because that percentage covers work that we've done in the past and will continue to do with partnership in the future. The other ones, as far as supporting local entrepreneurs, shared stewardship, responsibility for our community, and training and leadership programs, we really see represented in one of our core priorities, which is realizing the Tribune. In the Tribune, we're going to have a public space which will foster the local innovation that we've seen for years, and I see some of you that have been tinkering and working and innovating throughout the years. The creativity, connections, and new ideas that will help propel our economy into the future and really explore different ways of doing work in our community. So we're committed to that space where entrepreneurs, small businesses will get to work together with a commitment to job quality. So we were thrilled about that, and we're excited to continue our work in that area.
Thanks, Heather. Okay, so we're back to questions. We've looked at looking to the future. We've looked at some results related to information and obstacles to engagement. Questions? Thoughts?
Can I also just share a process standpoint?
Sure.
So for this part, I just wanted to share that for any questions you have about the presentation that we had tonight, you have two options. We can run a mic to you if you want to stand up and ask the question, or we do have a piece of paper on the back of that slide deck that we handed out where you could write it if you want to submit it and have someone else read it. So just wanted to let you know you had a couple of options.
Questions? Oop,
Test.
reflections?
Okay, coming down.
I have a question. Oh, sorry, I'm going to not drop my phone. Okay. I'm curious how many government representatives are here tonight, and how is Incourage cooperating with them? A lot of our responses are we don't see transparency in government, etc. Are our representatives here tonight?
Don't be shy. Those of you, I want to thank Senator Tustin for being here. I know that there are several local officials and some officials running for elected office. They were invited to come, and we're thrilled that they came.
Hi. As a new homeowner in the community and kind of new to the area, what needs addressed in the presentation is the Tribune project supposed to be meeting? I'm just kind of curious what the plans are for the space and what it's going to be targeted towards.
Hello? So I kind of addressed it with the slide as far as the entrepreneur and innovation. We have a whole handout that talks about all the different spaces. I don't want to go into that now. But really it is about thinking about economic development differently and how we can foster different types of economic activity as well as creation and connections. We heard from residents. Residents decided what would go into that building, and we're honoring that. But there are a lot of different pieces around the microbrewery, the creative workshop, cafe brew pub, local food, all those aspects. And being newer, we'd love to invite you into our office and talk more about it.
Other questions? I'm curious, when you go, when you sit at your kitchen table with people who weren't here this evening or in the local coffee shop tomorrow, what are you going to tell them that you learned tonight? Anything new? Something you're taking away? What's the top line you'd share? Anybody?
Everybody wants change, nobody knows what to do.
There were some organizations that got some pretty good performance reviews in one of those slides, charitable organizations, but I appreciate that comment. There was another.
Aren't you concerned that 20% answered the survey? Just
No,
400
because
people?
yeah, no, that's
And I
a
would
very
also like to see some specifics. We got a lot of information, but I don't see any specifics or what's going to be done. It's all general. Yes, that's not why we're here. We'd like to hear some specifics. The Tribune Building, $12 million. What are you going to do? How are you going to raise that money? 6 years. I think people here would like some answers.
Well, the survey wasn't really focused on the Tribune, but I could certainly address the first question. And I tried to address it very briefly in my introductory remarks around random sampling. In survey research, you don't, within a community of 30,000 people, you don't anticipate that you'll reach 30,000 people. So you have to make a calculation. It's a scientific calculation about what is the minimum response rate for a random sample. So a random sample is that you don't pick your friends or the folks that live down the driveway. You sample the community on a random basis. And if you sample randomly, there's a minimum number of responses that's required to do a statistical analysis, and that threshold was met. As to the details, there's a much longer report that will be available on the Incourage website within the week. We felt like in an environment like this, we didn't want to weigh you down with a lot of specifics. It's a lot to absorb. And I have a feeling that even what I shared tonight is still a lot to absorb. But all the details of the results will be available on the Incourage website within the week.
I'm drawing a question to your idea of transparency, because I'm curious. I do see a lot of people criticizing and a lot of, people focusing on some of the problems. And with the transparency, I guess my question partly would be, what would you see as being transparency? Because admittedly, I'm old, but I go on Facebook and I see like all of the city council, they're online. I mean, all of the meetings are actually there. You can watch them live. There's surveys that go out all the time. There was the zoo survey that just came out. There's all kinds of things. And I'm just wondering what makes it so that people feel like they're not being heard or they're not having an input. What makes it so that we feel like we're powerless and we can't actually get involved with our neighbors and our communities and make things better? What makes us feel like we can't go and ask questions and get a response from people that are pretty much usually have their doors open all the time? So I mean, I just feel like there's a lot of negativity from a lot of people, and I would like to see people that have kind of more of a positive can-do attitude to address some of these, situations. So.
Any other questions and reflections, things you're going to share at the coffee shop tomorrow? I don't think the mic is on. Okay.
How much variance or deviance does this community have compared to other surveys, I guess, that you've performed and research that you've performed? I understand that Incourage was intrinsically involved with the development of the questions, et cetera. When comparing this survey and the results of this survey with other surveys with different questions and different priorities, how does it compare?
That's a great question. So the survey questions were co-developed with Incourage based on a set of questions that were asked in 2012 in order for there to be continuity. And there was a process for the development of those 2012 survey questions about which I don't know the details. These kinds of questions on surveys are not unusual. In other words, people's attitudes towards the future, readiness for change, optimism about the future. And I couldn't speak for other communities more generally. I think that somebody made an observation earlier about good jobs and drug abuse. Those are high, those are showing up in other surveys around the country. The survey methodology, the approach to the survey, when I say the survey methodology, I mean the random sampling and the analysis was conducted by the gold standard nationally in survey research. I do think it's useful, since I've still got the podium, or I'm not at the podium, but I've still got the mic, to think about that question, right? Just to think about how your community compares to other communities on some of these measures, and look at the trajectories of those communities, positive and not so positive. So I think it's a good thing to ask that question. And there's some benchmark survey research on some of these issues. When I say benchmark, that's been done in other communities around the country in national surveys. I'd be very happy to make sure that that's also posted on the Incourage website if you'd like to take a look. I'm not sure if that answers your question. Yeah.
There's still, I think, some confusion between the CSR survey, the 400 versus the total number of participants, and how it's the same survey.
Yeah. Precisely for the purpose of getting a representative sample of responses that represent the community more broadly, we engaged the Center for Survey Research at the University of Massachusetts to take a random sample. They sent out 2,500 surveys to a random set of street addresses in the catchment area, right? We know that there's no bias in that sample. These are not friends of Incourage. They're not people that I know or that people at CSR knows. This is a random sample. It's very important that we had a core set of research findings that you could dine out on and that were representative of the community more broadly. Incourage also sent the survey out on its website in community meetings, but you'd anticipate that the folks that responded to the survey, and it's the same survey, but the folks that responded to the survey that Incourage was distributing, even though Incourage turns up in lots of different places in Southwood County, they would tend to be people who had contact with Incourage, went to the meetings that Incourage led. In other words, there would be a bias in that sample. And so we kept the two analyses separate. What I've reported to you tonight is the CSR sample, right? It's the, yeah. I hope that's understood. And here's the thing, a biased sample is not a bad thing, right? If you know what the bias is, if you know what the Incourage results look like, and you know that it's where those responses come from and which people, then you can say, this is really interesting. When you look at a sample, and I think the Incourage sample skewed more female and better educated. When you know that's the case, that the one sample looks a little different than the other, and you can say, that's interesting. This is how this population responds. Does that make sense to folks? Yeah.
I have a couple of questions regarding your subject right now. First of all, on your sample, your random samples in the total report that will be on the website, will you have such information as what the marginal error would be?
Yeah, 94%.
Okay, 94. That's very good.
Yep.
So the second question is, I did the online survey, which that would be the bias survey that you're talking about, because that's self-selecting. I chose to do that.
Yeah.
Did you measure the results of that survey too? In other words, if you did, how would that compare to the one where you had the random sample survey?
Yeah. So bias is such a hard word, right?
I know.
We're not using it in a pejorative way. It's the technical term is probability and non-probability sampling, but that's just getting in the weeds with the technical pieces. The Incourage survey result, what I'm calling the Courage-led survey, right? The one that you responded to, all those results will be available on the website as well with comparisons.
Good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. We have a question over here.
Thank you, Madeleine. This is in response to the young lady's comment over there about transparency and empowerment. And I think empowerment is a process, and it's learned behavior. And it begins with an awareness, like the surveys have done. And the people here tonight are becoming more aware of the situations that we do need to speak about and be empowered to talk about. And it's about giving us permission to do that and to talk with our representatives without feeling threatened. And that's something that has to come from within. And I think it's this whole, whether it's the Tribune process or the survey process, it's teaching empowerment, it's teaching engagement. And that's learned, and it does take time, and it doesn't happen overnight. But it's wonderful news. This is good news, and people should feel empowered with good information to be able to talk to their representatives. And they would love, I'm sure every representative here would love to hear from you, because they don't hear from a lot of people. And I think that they would agree with that. And so it's up to us. We elect them. It's up to us to communicate with them and have the conversation. But it's okay. It's okay to have good conversation. And
Thanks. Anybody else?
In terms of transparency, I guess from a personal responsibility position, I guess one thing that happened to me that was negative that I chose to do was not get the local newspaper. I don't know how many other people did this over the last 5 years, but I think for me it really impacted me in a negative way in terms of information, because I didn't have access to the local scrapbook, if you will. And that used to be, I was born in this city, but that used to be something that you went to and you could understand what was going on. The minutes were there from the various meetings. And because of social media in part, and I'm an avid Facebook junkie, as a lot of maybe grandparents are, the younger set so much is not on Facebook. Their social medias may be Snapchat or Instagram or some other medium, but I think there is some segmentation of information and loss of transparency because of that. I don't know how one jumps over that other than to, as you said, accept the responsibility for yourself and buy the paper or attend meetings like this. Years ago in this community, it used to be difficult to permeate the barriers. If you weren't a local, if you will, if you were an import from another part of the state or the United States and you came here, it could be difficult to find a spot, a way to get in and be heard, or even want to speak. I think maybe right now, in a positive light, we have an opportunity, because we all feel that same way now, that we're all having difficulty permeating the common need for our community's voice, I guess you could say. The one common thing that I think we all have, besides that we're all going to age, God willing, is that we have children in our community and schools, and we want to foster that, because after all, that's what it's all about. So maybe that's our common ground, is the kids. We either are grandparents, parents, we're going to have kids. We have a baby here tonight, and maybe that's the other positive we can bring from this, is let's focus on the little people. And in their 20s, I mean little people. I'm in my 60s. 30s to me is little people still. 40s, you know what I'm saying? So let's nurture all the way up, but let's focus on the positives of the different age groups, I think.
Thank you. I'm just going to add a little something based on some research that the Knight Foundation has done. And the Knight Foundation is a national philanthropy that focuses on using media and information. And you know, what they found is that in communities like yours and communities all over the country, the data is somewhere, right? The information is somewhere. Those minutes are somewhere, right? It's how people, what's often missing in small communities that lose their newspapers are the people who are doing the sense making, who are taking a lot of data and turning it into a story or a way for people to kind of digest it and understand it and act upon it. So there's kind of a missing link in the middle in many communities that are losing their local news. Because it's true, if there's data everywhere, there's tons of data out there, really. It's just, it's not only the access to it, it's the ability to interpret it and make it actionable in your life. And there's a, you know, there are intermediary organizations, not only newspapers, can play a very important role in that. Thank you for your comment.
I perceive from the slides that you showed that the greatest optimism, it appeared to me, were in the bookend age groups, the youngest age group and the oldest age group. And for some reason, I sense that to be very positive. Can you comment on that?
I think it's, well, I could comment as a human being. I'm not sure I can comment in the context of this, but what that says to me is, and it's really innovation, and innovation is about not repeating the past in the ways that we don't want to, but keeping the best of the past and moving forward with the future and innovating into the future. You want your young people to have that sense that there's a possibility of making change, of innovating. And so I think that's exciting. I think it's positive and hopeful. I think it's also hopeful that people over 65, when they look back at this community, because they have such a deep experience, many of them, right, can stand back and say, this community has a history of being innovative, of innovating itself out of crises in the past. So I think that's also very hopeful, that there's people with a perspective on this community over many years would say that. But I mean, you all will know better than I. Thank you for that question.
Just wanted to commend the Incourage organization for conducting the surveys, very eye-opening, and I think some of the questions or answers are also an opportunity for us to introspectively ask ourselves, you know, what is important and what can I do to change things. So that's fantastic. Now, these same questions, the information being presented here tonight, gives us also the opportunity to dig further into this good stuff. So I wonder, what is the plan for the future? Is it going to be the next 5 years to find out more about it? As I said, it's an opportunity to start asking refined questions and looking for solutions that apparently people are looking for.
Mm-hmm. I know that Incourage may have something to say about that, but I wondered if anybody else did. So are you going to wait for 5 years to see the results in 5 years? Do any of you have some ideas for where you might take this, or going deeper in the conversation? Do you belong to community groups, or? I'm just curious, but where you might
Well, I think it starts with ourselves, one thing. But moving forward, I think it's an opportunity, like I said, to dig into this a little bit more. Yeah. So it would be either Incourage or the local representatives to, once they have found out this, okay, if it's transparency, okay, like the lady already said, let's talk about it. If it's about security or drugs, okay, why are you concerned? What is it that you're concerned? Let's deal with the problems.
So I know that Heather is going to has a comment to make. I know you know this, but I just want to repeat that the survey is broadly representative of the community. And so in every community, including my own, there are people who turn up for events like this, right? They're curious, they're engaged, they want to act on information. There are people who are not here tonight because they can't get daycare, they don't have transportation. People's lives are different, and people are interested in different things. What's important about these results is that they're broadly representative of the community, including people who didn't make it tonight. Right, so that's really that gives you a call to action. I think that that's important. So, Heather.
Great. I would just add, and thank you for that question, because I think that's probably what some people are thinking and asking themselves. And I have an easy answer and I have a hard answer. The easy answer is in April, our partners of Incourage, so our elected officials, our partner organizations like the YMCA, the Boys and Girls Club, the Health Department, are coming together as organizations in this community to take a deeper dive into the data itself. And also, Madeleine and her team did some work on each organization's data that they use and share, so we can get a sense of, are there any gaps in data that we have at this community? Do we have maybe data that is helping one organization but isn't helping another? So when we look at those results around collaboration, it gets to that. And I know that our partners are eager for that meeting. So that's one step, but I think you also answered the question, and I heard it in your comment as well, is that it's up to us. This is a data point. This is everyone in this room and outside of this room's perspective, and yet whatever you're passionate about and eager to change and make movement on, what are we going to do about that? I would say, what are we collectively going to do about it? Because we certainly don't have the answer, nor do we want the answer. We want to work together with community to address these issues.
I just wanted to say that one of the things we collectively can do is when we go home to our neighborhoods or we are at work tomorrow or wherever we are, we can talk about the number of people that showed up, showed an interest. While there's different opinions in the room, the only way to make change really is to get involved and to talk to others, talk to our neighbors about what's happening in our community and the fact that people here do want change. And the only way that it's going to happen is for people to get involved.
I think there's somebody up at the back.
I think for me, the hardest thing, I hear a lot of people mentioning that it's hard for us, I guess, to, actually, I already phrased this. So earlier you had mentioned something about having that middle piece missing, being that there's people that want to get involved and then organizations that want people to get involved. And I think it'd be helpful for Incourage to kind of, I guess, help bridge that gap in that, like, if there's, for all those things that were mentioned on there saying drugs is one of the issues, I think there should be a way for people to get involved in saying how they're going to fix that, or schools, and having, these are some suggestions, I guess, communities or groups that are already working on trying to do that, and here's how you can get involved in those things, so that, like you mentioned, people being able to pick the things that they're interested in and being able to go and say, oh, if I want to be able to reach out to my congressman or whoever this person that I'm trying to reach to in local government, or actually that's not congressman, I guess it'd be more of like a state official, or that's neither here nor there. It'd be an easier way for me to reach out to them, saying like, oh, we can reach out to them through this way, because I think when I went to there was like Incourage did like a community thing where they had people come in and they asked questions and blah, blah, blah. One of the things that I had voiced was that I'd gone onto the Wisconsin Rapids website to try and reach out to my alderman, and it is the most complicated website, and I think it is very difficult as a person trying to get involved to try and access those things, and being able to have that as a hurdle, or going and being able to find those meetings minutes. I'm gonna go and look on the Facebook website now so I can go and watch those online, because I know that's something that we can do, so that's just my input.
Thank you.
Who attended at the library was what Madeleine referred to in the slide deck as community conversations. This is a practice that we did in 2012 and we wanted to do in 2017 as well. So in tandem with people taking the survey, we had residents and Incourage staff members go out and host conversations with residents around 4 or 5 of the key questions on the survey to get context and get examples and to hear people's story. And I just wanted to share, I appreciated you coming to that conversation, because it was an open forum, not only to respond to the questions, but for people to have dialogue in this community about what they're passionate about, whether they were large groups or small. And my own experience of going out and having those conversations, I heard a deep love for this community. I heard a real passion for the assets of our community and a concern for the challenges and how people wanted to be involved. And that's something really great, because when I moved back to this community, all I heard was about the negative aspects of our community. And I was filled with joy that people really see the value that we have and the difference we can make.
Corey, was there another question up there? Okay. Looking around the room. I think that's it then. Well, I'm so grateful for your attention this evening. As I said, it was very exciting for me to come here and share these results. More to come on the Incourage website. So thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.